It began with the smell, sweet, sour, thick as diesel, that drifted across Interstate 70 at dawn on April 18, 2016, just west of Terre Haute, Indiana. Chris, Red, Mallory and Lena Gutierrez, maintenance subcontractors, were dragging a brush blade behind a county mower when Red's nostrils flared and his boot heel scuffed to a stop. A rancid mist seemed to hover above the drainage ditch at mile marker 23. And gnats swarmed like black confetti over something rectangular half submerged in muck. Red called to Lena, who hopped from the cab, muttering about a dead deer. But deer didn't travel sealed inside a pair of blue Coleman coolers chained together by a length of nylon rope. The first state trooper arrived 9 minutes later. By 6:42, the eastbound lanes were cordoned off, and forensic techs in Tvec crouched beside the coolers, flash strobes illuminating their backs like silent lightning. Sergeant Mace Holloway, 39, lead investigator with the Indiana State Police Violent Crimes Section, knelt, breathed through his mouth, and flicked a penlight across the pitted lids. A cheap luggage lock held the chain. One tech clipped it. Holloway lifted the first lid and recoiled. Inside, curled like a question mark, lay the body of a woman in her mid-20s, clothed only in a red camisole. Plastic cable ties shackled her wrists to her ankles. A second woman of similar age occupied the twin cooler. Her hands were taped behind her back. A dog collar encircled her neck, from which a 3-foot leash coiled like a dead snake. Both faces were bloated, blackened, unrecognizable under the first flush of insect colonization. Holloway tasted metal at the back of his throat and snapped the lid shut. Within an hour, satellite news vans jammed the access road. Dish antennas angled skyward. Holloway said nothing on camera. He ordered a hard perimeter, requested cadaver dogs to sweep a 5-mile radius, and phoned the Vigo County medical examiner, Dr. Rebecca Anwar. She arrived at 8:03, eyes rimmed by sleepless mauve. The bodies, she estimated, had been dead at least 10 days, maybe 2 weeks. Both showed ligature abrasions on wrists, ankles, and neck. One bore bruises across the clavicle in a pattern suggesting manual compression of the airway, strangulation. Inside the second cooler, Horton saw something wedged beneath the victim's thigh, an index card in a plastic sleeve. On it, block letters in Sharpie read, "Find her. Find me. No ids. No personal effects except a mismatched hoop earring and a chipped purple nail on the right-hand pinky of victim 1. Holloway issued a bolo across the Midwest. 2 unidentified females, Caucasian or Latina, age range 18 to 30, last known alive within past month, possibly associated with BDSM or transient circles. The response avalanche began. Illinois, Missouri, Ohio, Kentucky, all counties with open missing person cases for waitresses, college runaways, women who'd left home chasing online romances that promised danger wrapped in velvet words. By sunset, latent print units had lifted a partial from the cooler's handle, too smudged for AFIS. Holloway persevered, running the serial number etched beneath the Coleman logo. Retail Trace placed the purchase at a Walmart in Columbia, Missouri. On March 28, credit card information pegged the buyer, Harris Nathaniel J., 48, retired deputy sheriff, Boone County. Holloway felt a chill spider along his spine. Ex-law enforcement. If anything could make a killer slipperier, it was a badge hanging in his closet. He pulled Harris personnel file, hired 1994, resigned 2008 after an internal investigation into inappropriate contact with confidential female informants. No criminal charges, multiple commendations, skill citations in restraints and defensive tactics. Post-resignation, Harris bounced through private security gigs, arena concerts, truck depots, late-night bank cash runs. 2 civil complaints, both dismissed, alleged stalking and sexual harassment of female coworkers. At 2:17 the next morning, Holloway and a SWAT entry team rolled west on I-70, convoying toward Harris Rental Farmhouse outside Fulton, Missouri, 93 miles away. April rain sheeted across windshield glass, lightning flickered over flat soybean fields like cracked strobes. They cut sirens 4 miles out. Rolling black, near the mailbox, a rust-eaten blue barrel chained to a fence post. Holloway inhaled the same sweet-sour rot he'd smelled 12 hours earlier. He flicked his flashlight beam into the ditch and froze. A white plastic Home Depot bucket sat beneath drifting rainwater. Lid duct-taped, rope handle looped over a welded chain. Flies carpeted the rim. Inside that bucket, curled fetal beneath trash bags, lay a third woman. 3 coolers. 1 bucket. 3 victims at least. Holloway's gut clenched. Find her. Find me. The note wasn't taunt, it was instruction. A breadcrumb he'd already followed right to the killer's den. SWAT breached at 3:21. The farmhouse stank of bleach overlaying animal musk. In the basement they discovered a kennel cage, padlocked, blankets crusted with bodily fluids, and a bolted iron eye hook set into a ceiling joist. Zip ties, collars, leashes, a cattle prod, and on a plywood table, laminated print-outs from a bondage classified site called darkpastures.com. User handle Deputy Dom. Profile tagline: seeking permanent 24/7 slave. No limits, no release. Harris was gone. On an upstairs nightstand, beside an empty Glock case and a Boone County deputy badge, sat a phone. Screen aglow with an unsent draft message. Leave the nightlight on. Petra, I'm almost there. Time for absolute captivity. Holloway's pulse hammered. Another target. Alive somewhere. And Harris already on the move. Hunting. Lightning crashed. Killing power. In that instant of utter black, Holloway felt the scale of it all. The women. The rope. The chained coolers like coffins engineered for transport, and knew the road ahead stretched wider. Darker. More brutal than anything he'd chased before. He flicked his flashlight back on, took a breath of bleach-tainted air, and called the command post. We've got 3 bodies, he said, voice hoarse, and a live one on the clock. This is just the beginning. By 6:45 the next morning, a bolo went out nationwide. Nathaniel J. Harris, white male, 48, 6'1", 210 pounds, gray hair, last seen driving a silver 2004 Ford Ranger with Missouri tags, was now a federal fugitive. The marshals were looped in, as were the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit and VICAP. 3 dead women, at least 1 possible living victim, a former cop who knew how to vanish. This wasn't just a manhunt, it was a countdown. Mason Holloway didn't sleep. Back in Terre Haute, his crime scene team was piecing together evidence from the farmhouse. On the wall of the basement, behind a layer of duct-taped insulation, they found what looked like a shrine, 8 Polaroids thumbtacked in a crude grid. All of women, different races, different ages, all collared, all gagged, some smiling, some not. 4 of them were confirmed dead. One of them was now being called Petra, the woman mentioned in the draft text message. One of the photos had been defaced with a Sharpie, the woman's eyes blacked out. And underneath in block letters, failed. Holloway stared at it for nearly a full minute. It didn't feel like porn. It felt like scorekeeping. The FBI's VICAP system quickly matched one of the other photographed women to a cold case in Ohio, Melinda Voss. 22. Last seen in 2014 after replying to a Craigslist ad for a live-in submissive. Her body had been found wrapped in plastic in the Cuyahoga River 3 months later. Cause of death, undetermined. The ad she'd answered had been posted by someone calling himself Honest Dom 417. No IP address. Burner phone. No arrest ever made. But one thing stood out. That phrase. Live-in submissive. It came up again and again, in Harris' profile. His saved bookmarks. Even in chat logs retrieved from the wiped laptop forensic techs had painstakingly reconstructed. Despite using data scrubbing software over 20,000 times, Harris had overlooked the cloud backups. The conversations painted a chilling picture of grooming, coercion, and psychological breakdown. One woman, still alive, had described how he instructed her to practice kneeling for 4 hours a day. Another was told to isolate herself from friends. You belong to no one but me. He'd written, your voice is now mine. That same line appeared in the last known chat message with Petra. Holloway, now lead liaison with the feds, stood inside the command trailer parked at the crime scene. A map stretched across the back wall, littered with pins, threads, and sticky notes. But all roads led to one conclusion. Harris was hunting someone. Not just at random. This wasn't about sex, it was about control. Through cell phone triangulation and traffic cam pings, they finally tracked his last known movement. At 10:12 p.m. the night prior, the Ford Ranger had exited off I-64 near Huntington, West Virginia, heading into rural woodland. Then, silence. No more pings. He'd likely ditched the phone. Holloway knew what that meant. Either Harris was preparing to go dark permanently, or he was nearing Petra. Petra's identity had finally been uncovered. Her real name, Rebecca Lang, 29, from Lexington, Kentucky, a paralegal who moonlighted on niche forums for the BDSM community under the name Little Knot. Her last message, 2 days before the first cooler was found, had said only, "I'm going off-grid for a bit, trusting my gut." Her roommate thought she was just disappearing for a scene weekend with a dom. But Rebecca hadn't packed her phone charger, her work laptop, or her epilepsy meds. By the time they tracked her down through her online alias, it had been nearly 72 hours. The margin for survival was closing. The marshals requested drones and K9 units to scan the hollers outside Huntington. But the terrain was punishing: steep ravines, thick brush, abandoned coal shafts like open jaws in the forest. Holloway rode shotgun in a blacked-out Suburban driven by Agent Samira Greer from the FBI. She was 32, ex-Army PSYOPS, and didn't flinch when Harris' photo popped up again and again on rural gas station bulletins. "He's not done yet," she muttered as they bounced down a gravel logging road. "People like him don't run. They finish." The woods narrowed to a single-lane path. At the end of it, just before noon, they found it. A hunting cabin. No utilities. No Wi-Fi. Just a rusted lock on the door. Broken. Inside was the smell, faint but there. Sweet. Sick. Bleach and decay. In the center of the room was a steel cage. And inside that cage, a woman. Her skin was pale, lips cracked, and her eyes, sunken but alive, flicked open with a darting animal alertness when the agents entered. She recoiled, unsure if they were real or part of another mind game. "Rebecca Lang?" Holloway knelt slowly beside the cage, lowering his voice. "You're safe. I'm with the FBI." She blinked. One tear. That was all. The door was padlocked from the outside, but the lock was old. Greer shattered it with a crowbar. When the door swung open, Rebecca didn't move. She was too weak. Greer wrapped her in a thermal blanket while Holloway gently supported her trembling frame. Her wrists were raw, blistered from what looked like weeks of restraint. Around her neck, still fastened, was a worn leather collar. There were words burned into it. "Property of NH." They rushed her out. A helicopter waited at a nearby clearing. Paramedics took over, but Holloway rode with her, his notebook already open. "Rebecca," he asked as the blades whirred overhead, "do you remember how long you were kept there?" She stared at the ceiling of the chopper, mouth twitching. 22 days, she rasped. "He told me I was his final draft." "Final draft?" He said the others were rough edits. Mistakes. Holloway's stomach turned. "What did he do to you?" She swallowed hard. "He trained me, conditioned me, made me recite things. Made me forget my name. Called me Ink. Said I'd be the one he gets right. The one who doesn't scream." She coughed violently, then whispered, "He was preparing a performance." That phrase, performance, lingered in Holloway's mind like a bad aftertaste. Back at the command center, Rebecca's rescue sent waves through the task force. The news broke nationally. FBI rescues woman from cage in West Virginia cabin. Photos of Harris were now on every major network. But instead of celebration, the room remained silent, because Harris wasn't there. His clothes were, his journal was, even his toothbrush. But no Nathaniel Harris. What they did find, however, was far worse. Behind the cabin's false wall, agents discovered a hidden crawlspace. Inside it, dozens of VHS tapes, neatly labeled with dates and names. Most had handwritten titles like K, First Week, or G, Silent Trial. The tapes were immediately sent to Quantico's digital forensics lab, but one was played on site. The footage was grainy, time-stamped March 2007. A woman sat chained to a radiator, blindfolded, her mouth sewn shut with black thread. Harris' voice was audible, instructing her in a calm, almost tender tone. "This is day 4. You've done very well, Gwendolyn. Today, we try silence. Deep, holy silence. Greer stopped the tape. We don't need to see more. Of the 36 tapes, 12 had names that corresponded with known missing persons. 6 were completely unknown, never reported, never found. But it was the final 3 tapes that chilled the room to the bone. They were labeled not with names but with phrases. Sermon. Part 1. Sermon. Part 2. Ascension. And then there was the journal. A thick, leather-bound volume filled with meticulous handwriting. Harris documented everything: methods, psychological tests, failures. He referred to his victims not as women, but as offerings. He wrote of a cleansing ritual, of becoming more than man. One passage stood out, underlined in red. Ink will speak my truth. The final voice. When she ascends, the world will hear me. The phrase, when she ascends, was repeated 5 more times throughout the book. Each reference described a process involving recording, display, and the final witness. Rebecca, then, wasn't just another victim. She was meant to be the centerpiece of something. A performance, a message, a ritual. And Harris, he wasn't fleeing. He was preparing. By the time Rebecca regained enough strength to speak fully, she dropped another bombshell. Harris had mentioned a location. Not a real town. A name he kept repeating when he was teaching her. Ararat, the mountain from the Bible. The landing place of Noah's Ark. But Harris didn't mean Turkey. He meant somewhere close. A symbolic name. A hidden place. The FBI's analysts pored over maps. In southern Ohio, just across the river from where Harris had last been seen, was a privately owned piece of land named Mount Ararat Retreat Center. Officially abandoned in 1998 after a fire, but records showed that it had been purchased under an LLC in 2005. The name of that LLC? NH Revival Ministries. The full task force mobilized. 12 vehicles, 2 Black Hawks, and SWAT teams from both Ohio and federal branches descended on Mount Ararat at dawn. And what they found there, no one was prepared for. The morning sky over southern Ohio was thick with gray clouds, casting a damp chill across the wooded property known on paper as Mount Ararat Retreat Center. At exactly 5:48 a.m., a convoy of FBI tactical vehicles and local law enforcement rumbled down the narrow gravel road leading to the site. Grass brushed high against their tires, and a sagging wooden sign read private property, no trespassing. Everything about the place whispered abandonment, and yet, something was waiting. The center itself had long been decommissioned, once used for spiritual retreats in the early 80s, then sold to a private LLC whose real owners were unknown. The property included a collapsed dining hall, 3 cabins overtaken by vines, and an old chapel that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. But what wasn't listed in any blueprints or tax records was the underground structure that Agent Holloway's team discovered beneath the chapel floor. It started with a vent, barely noticeable behind the old pulpit. Agent Martinez kicked aside rotted wood to reveal a trapdoor, caked in decades of grime. Beneath it, a concrete stairwell descended into darkness. Cold air rushed upward, carrying the unmistakable stench of mildew and blood. They descended in silence. The basement was more than just a storm shelter. It was a network, hallways carved crudely through concrete, reinforced with rusted steel beams. Along the left corridor were 8 heavy doors, metal, sealed, each with a small window. Every room was empty, except one. Cell 6. Greer approached the door first, weapon drawn. It wasn't locked. He nudged it open slowly. Inside, the air was stale and sour. At the center of the room was a wooden chair, bolted to the ground. Leather restraints dangled from the armrests. Mounted on a tripod in the corner was a video camera, old school. VHS tape still loaded. And on the chair sat something inhuman. A mannequin crafted crudely from stitched-together latex. A wig affixed to its scalp. And over its face, a mask. A mask made from real human skin. Scrawled on the wall in what looked like dried blood. She spoke out of turn. The tape was still warm. Holloway popped it into a portable player brought down by the tech team. Static. Then it rolled. A woman, mid-20s, bound to the same chair. Her mouth gagged, her eyes vacant. She wasn't begging. She was reciting. I give myself to the shepherd. I surrender my name. My pain is his. The video cut out just as a tall figure entered the frame. Black hood, no voice, just motion. He tightened the cord around her neck slowly, methodically. Rebecca, the only known survivor, was brought in an hour later. Flanked by 2 agents, she stepped into the hallway and immediately froze. Her breath caught. This was the sermon room. She whispered. She pointed toward a crude symbol etched onto the far wall with charred wood, an eye pierced by a vertical blade. That's their mark, she said. That's what he branded on her back before he did it. Holloway's skin prickled. He'd seen that symbol once before, years ago, carved into a tree outside a burned-down foster home in rural Iowa. A girl had gone missing there. No one ever found her. They assumed she'd run. Now, it looked like she'd been taken. Back at HQ, the Bureau's Digital Crimes Unit pulled metadata from the camera and scanned forum logs. A username surfaced. Prophet NH. He'd been active for nearly a decade on dark forums tied to BDSM and domination roleplay. But his posts were different, ritualistic, obsessive, and increasingly violent. One post read, "Obedience isn't given, it must be carved. The tongue betrays, but silence saves." More posts matched the tone, many referencing flocks, cleansing, and a covenant sealed in blood. Even more disturbing, at least 3 missing persons across state lines had accounts interacting with Prophet NH before they vanished. This wasn't just about one killer. Holloway was now convinced. There was a network. And the next morning, evidence from Quantico confirmed it. Hair and epithelial samples taken from cell 6 returned DNA belonging to 3 separate individuals, 1 male, 1 female, and 1 unidentified subject with no match in the national database. Only 1 belonged to Harris, which meant someone else was down there with him, possibly orchestrating everything, possibly still out there. The Appalachian rain came down hard that night, cold. Endless sheets that battered the pine trees and washed red clay down the hillside in slow rivers. Inside the FBI's makeshift command post just outside Ashland, Kentucky, Agent Holloway stood over the whiteboard, every inch covered in scribbled names, red yarn, blurry surveillance stills, and pinned mugshots, the kind of chaos that only made sense to a mind drowning in it. Across from him, Rebecca Lang sat in a wool blanket, pale and trembling but clear-eyed. Her voice, though cracked, had not wavered once since she started recounting what she had seen. She didn't cry. She didn't ask for a lawyer. She just spoke. There were 3 of them, she said. Nathaniel was the enforcer, the physical one, the guy in charge. We only ever called him the preacher. He never gave his real name. He just watched. What about the 3rd? Agent Greer asked gently. Rebecca flinched, her fingers tightening around the styrofoam cup of herbal tea. She was one of us. At first. Then she started wearing the mask. A long silence followed. Greer and Holloway exchanged a glance. A woman, a defector, a believer turned handler. Rebecca nodded slowly. She had this stare, like she'd already died and something else was wearing her skin. The preacher, the enforcer, the convert, the FBI's criminal profiler. Dr. Leland Show arrived 2 hours later by chopper from Quantico. As a specialist in occult behavior and splinter cell cults, he was infamous for his ability to crawl inside minds that most agents didn't want to go near. He spent only 10 minutes watching the recovered VHS tape from Cell 6 before turning to Holloway and saying, "You're not dealing with a serial killer. You're dealing with a doctrine." The tapes, the chants, the branding, even the way the victims were buried, or posed, followed patterns found in breakaway religious death sects from the 70s and 90s. But this one had a digital footprint. Prophet NH was no isolated lunatic in a basement. He was recruiting, whispering, and people were listening. Dr. Cho pulled up archived posts from the deep web, coded sermons. Parables rewritten with the predator as savior, the submissive as offering, and in the center of it all, one name kept reappearing, often scrambled, buried in metadata or in the file names of uploaded snuff fantasies. The Covenant of the Hollow Eye. No federal records existed, no formal listing as a cult, but a trove of chatter across encrypted forums indicated that the Covenant wasn't just philosophy, it was movement. And Nathaniel Harris? He wasn't the leader. He was their hound. That same night, a forensic team finally cracked the encryption on Harris' recovered burner laptop. In a hidden partition, they found over 30 gigabytes of video, raw, time-stamped, meticulously labeled footage of sessions. Some dated back nearly a decade. Most were filmed in the same room: the chair, the cage, the crucifix-like restraint bar. At least 5 of the victims were unidentified. In one of the newer files, a woman is heard pleading behind the gag. But what caught the agents off guard was the voice in response. It was female, calm, authoritative. "I told you, obedience is quiet." Rebecca was brought in to listen. Her hand shook so hard, she nearly dropped the headphones. Then she looked up at Holloway and said, "That's her. That's the one who wore the mask." 2 hours later, facial recognition software had a match. Her name: Chloe Madsen, 36. Last seen in Baton Rouge in 2017. Former sociology graduate student. Reported missing. Case closed as a likely suicide when her car was found abandoned by the river. No body recovered. Cho leaned forward, reading her file aloud. She wrote her thesis on cult indoctrination and authoritarian submission in controlled communities. Before she vanished, she'd been writing letters to a federal inmate. Guess who? Holloway didn't blink. Harris? Nope. Cho tapped the screen. To an inmate named Peter Azariah, convicted leader of a religious death cult in Montana back in '98. Life sentence. Died in prison. And before he did, he wrote Chloe into his will. She was trying to rebuild it. Holloway muttered, "Resurrect it, not rebuild." Cho said, "Refine. Blank. Underscore. Blank." At 3:37 a.m., the Ashland PD reported an abandoned vehicle on a fire trail 20 miles east, silver Ford Ranger. Matching Harris plate, Holloway, Greer, and Cho were in the SUV within minutes. The truck sat crooked on the side of the trail. One tire blown. In the backseat, a discarded dog collar, a roll of duct tape, and a Polaroid photograph. The photo showed a bound woman, alive, terrified, and a handwritten date, July 4 to 6 p.m. Holloway clenched his jaw. "Tomorrow." He flipped the photo over. Written in pen. "She speaks out of turn. She burns." A new countdown had begun. July 4th, Independence Day. But for the FBI's field team in rural Kentucky, there was no celebration, only urgency. With the photo of a bound woman marked for execution at 6 p.m., Agent Holloway's team launched a desperate, full-scale manhunt across the Appalachians. Air support from Quantico circled overhead. Drones were deployed, dogs were brought in, and every law enforcement officer within 50 miles was on high alert. The problem? The terrain was vast. Hundreds of square miles of dense forest, caves, abandoned cabins, and old mining shafts. The Covenant knew how to disappear. They weren't amateurs. They were tacticians, predators with patience. At 9:24 a.m., the FBI cyber unit in D.C. picked up a ping. An encrypted signal bounced off a darknet relay, leading them to a server node just north of Charleston, West Virginia. Hidden in the metadata of a seemingly random 3-minute grainy video file was a GPS coordinate. A single line of text flashed at the end of the video. "The sermon begins at dusk. The lamb must burn clean." The location? An abandoned children's summer camp, Camp Hollow Brook. Shuttered in 1994 after a fire killed 2 counselors and 3 campers. The locals said the place was cursed. Now, it looked like the Covenant had chosen it as their temple. Blank. Underscore. Blank. By 2:30 p.m., 4 tactical units surrounded the perimeter of the campgrounds. Drones revealed old bunkhouses with collapsed roofs, a mess hall overtaken by moss, and a concrete amphitheater covered in vines. No movement, not even birds. Holloway gave the green light. Team Alpha entered from the west, silent, tight formation. Team Bravo circled wide along the creek bed. Cho and Greer hung back with aerial feeds and thermal imaging. And within minutes, Agent Wilkins' voice cracked over the comms. "I've got heat signatures. 2 in the old lodge. 1 in the amphitheater. Copy? Holloway. Copy. Do not engage until I say. We take them alive." But as they breached the lodge, the nightmare unfolded. 2 people inside, but neither was the hostage. One was unconscious. A man, mid-30s, covered in burn scars, restrained to a rusted cot. His wrists were bandaged, his mouth gagged with a piece of cloth that read, "Heretic." The second? A woman already dead, throat slit, her eyes stitched open. Nailed to her chest was a sign, "Faithless." The amphitheater was worse. In the center of the cracked concrete stage stood a steel frame, a vertical cross, rigged with chains and wires. And strapped to it, barely conscious, was the woman from the photo. Blonde, bloodied, duct tape over her mouth. A timer hung from a hook above her head. Red numbers blinking. 0 hours 34 minutes and 26 seconds. 34 minutes until ignition. The cross was wired to ignite from below, homemade thermite charges rigged to gasoline. Sophisticated, precise, designed to burn her alive. Bones and all. Cho disarmed the charges with seconds to spare. And just as they pulled her down, she gasped, wide-eyed. "He's not here," she whispered. "He never was." He said, "I'm just the message." Cho's heart dropped. Holloway froze. And then his phone buzzed. A single email from an anonymous sender. Subject: The Fourth Flame. Attached: a live feed. A woman, brunette, bound in a bathtub, her mouth gagged, her body trembling. The background: a tiled bathroom with cracked white paint and a broken window. The video quality was high def. Too clear. It wasn't filmed here. A new timer flashed in the top corner. 0 hours 59 minutes and 58 seconds. 60 minutes. And below the timer, a message burned into the frame. She defied the scripture. She will be purified. Holloway didn't wait. He threw his earpiece down. Barked orders to trace the IP and geolocation of the livestream. Cho was already scanning details: tile pattern, window type, water stains. He muttered, "It's familiar. That's a cheap chain motel, maybe a red roof or night's inn." Upper Midwest design. Within 12 minutes, the feed was traced to a nearby town, Madisonville, just 2 hours west, a motel off Route 70. The Clairview Inn. By the time the team arrived, room 214 was locked from the inside. The front desk had no record of anyone checking in. Holloway kicked in the door himself. But the tub was empty. Wet, still warm. The ropes lay on the floor. The gag floated in the half-filled basin. Written in lipstick on the cracked mirror: "Obedience delayed is obedience denied." They were seconds late. Again. Blank. Underscore. Blank. That night, the FBI launched the Hollow Eye Protocol, a top-level interstate manhunt now involving Homeland Security, multiple state bureaus, and task forces in 5 major cities. A dedicated task room was opened in D.C. with a permanent team scanning dark web activity 24/7. Chloe Madsen's name was placed on every major wanted list in the country. A reward of $500 was announced for any information leading to her arrest. Cho called her an evolved predator. Not just a sadist, not just a convert, a missionary. She was no longer just hiding. She was performing. And the message was far from over. The final thread unraveled in a dusty farmhouse outside Davenport, Iowa. At first glance, it looked like every other abandoned property scattered across the rural Midwest. Shuttered windows, overgrown weeds, a rusted-out Chevy in the back, its tires sunken into the earth. But inside, beneath floorboards stained with time and silence, was the heart of the covenant. The FBI arrived just past midnight, led by Agent Holloway and Cho. They'd followed a string of clues embedded in the latest livestream, geotags hidden in the audio spectrum. A coded Bible verse that led to the county records of an old land transfer. And a pattern of motel check-ins tied to the name, Darla Kinsey. An alias linked to Chloe Madsen. Everything pointed here, but they weren't prepared for what they found beneath the house. A steel door in the basement. Reinforced, unmarked. Behind it, a staircase descending into cold earth. And at the bottom, light. Fluorescent, flickering, buzzing. They entered, and found hell. A room lined with plastic sheeting. Cameras mounted in every corner. Blood dried into the concrete. Symbols carved into the walls, upside-down crosses. Runes, handprints. A makeshift altar stood at the center, surrounded by a ring of charred dolls and melted candles. On the wall, scrawled in black, "Obey and be cleansed. Resist and burn." They found footage, hard drives, a manifesto printed in triplicate. But Chloe was gone. And what they didn't expect, what shattered Agent Cho's composure, was what the files revealed. This wasn't Chloe's cult. She wasn't the founder. She wasn't even the architect. She was a disciple. The real leader was someone else. A name that had appeared only once before, in a deleted forum post buried inside a BDSM site where Chloe had first been recruited. Miriam. No last name, no photo, no digital footprint, just a screen name, just whispers. But every document in that basement bore her signature. It was Miriam who had drafted the rules of obedience. Miriam who had orchestrated the suitcase purifications. Miriam who had trained Chloe, indoctrinated her, broken her. And the most horrifying part? The manifest revealed that Chloe wasn't the only disciple. There were more. 5 names. 5 women, each assigned a flame designation. Chloe Madsen, Flame 3. Flames 1 and 2, deceased. Flames 4 and 5, unidentified, active, and each assigned to a different region. Holloway dropped the file. His voice trembled. We're not dealing with a killer. We're dealing with a movement. Blank. Underscore. Blank. 2 days later, a video surfaced online. It was professionally edited, cinematic. Slow piano music played underneath. The screen faded from black to an image of Chloe Madsen, seated in a dark room, candlelight flickering on her face. Calm, controlled, cold. She spoke directly to the camera. You tried to stop the word. But the word cannot be stopped. You call us monsters. But we are cleansers. You live in filth. You call it freedom. We burn what cannot be saved. And the fire is just beginning. She smiled. A gentle, chilling smile. To the flames who wait. Your time has come. Obedience is salvation. Let the 4th sermon begin. The video cut to black. Then, a title card appeared. July 17th, Amarillo, Texas. Blank. Underscore. Blank. That same day, Agent Cho received a call from a field office in Amarillo. A woman had walked into a church just off Route 287. Bloodied, barefoot, she handed the pastor a flash drive, collapsed, and died in his arms. A note in her pocket read, "She burned me for failing her." The flash drive contained video of her torture, a manifesto, and a new list of potential targets. The woman was Flame 4. Flame 5 had yet to be found. Blank. Underscore. Blank. Back in D.C., the FBI officially reclassified the Covenant as a domestic terror organization. A new task force was formed, Project Ember. Holloway and Cho were reassigned full-time to lead it. But in a quiet moment, weeks later, Cho admitted something to Holloway. "I don't think we'll catch her." "Not Miriam." "Why?" Holloway asked. Cho didn't look up from the files. He just whispered, "Because I don't think she exists." Holloway stared at him. "You think she's dead?" "No." Cho said, I think she's an idea. An identity they pass on. A ghost they keep alive. So she never dies." The silence between them said what neither could. This wasn't over. Not even close.